It can be 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, bah! I have the idea, I've dreamed about music. And this whole process about feeling that you have a divine connection. I'm a slave to it, I would say.
I always knew in the back of my head that I was going to have something to do with music because I was quite just obsessed with rhythm.
DJing was just always a hobby at first. Me and my friends would go back to my house after school and try to keep 4 records on beat. That was like the thing. Who could keep 4 records on beat at the same time?
My early speciality was really playing soul and jazz funk and reggae. It was all about these records that no one else could get.
Basically, Mum and Dad had their own record player, and I used to use their record player and wreck their needles. They said the only way you can get your own sound system if you do a paper round and a milk round to earn money, and I could pay it off after 3 years, I think it was, at £2.50 a week, and that's how it started.
Electronic music let me feel emotions I wasn't capable of really feeling or understanding myself. So in many ways, I DJ to continue to feel those emotions.
It gives you such a rush being on stage and being able to change the course of an evening and react to how the crowd's going. You just kind of get lost in it, just in the zone if it's going really well. It's a great feeling when it all kind of comes together. You just ride that adrenaline wave up until the end of your set and then crash afterwards.
I think a lot of people, I don't think they really understand the mental and physical toll.
I was deeply unhappy.
I kind of went through this quite depressive stage. I had like anxiety all the time, every day.
There is a side that is extremely hardcore for you. Psychologically, you have to be strong. You have to be strong. It has the good side and the bad side.
There's been an element of DJs becoming DJs because of the perceived glamour, probably for 20 years or more. Certainly since the explosion of the first superstar DJs in the early to mid 90s, you know, Sasha, Fatboy Slim, all of, so obviously there's a certain attraction from those guys being on pop programs and crossing over into the charts.
More from back in the day, a lot of the DJs were kind of shy and more comfortable in the booth maybe than they were in kind of social situations. Music nerds, ultimately.
There's a link between being a professional musician and the personality characteristic of introversion.
I like to consider myself an introvert, extrovert, you know? Classically introvert, extrovert on TV.
Normally I'm a pretty shy guy, but when the night comes or when the performance comes, somebody else is coming out of me wild and crazy.
Many of the DJs that I've come across are very quiet people. They were the nerdy guy that collected all the records.
Less so now. We see the kind of brash performer style of the kind of EDM DJ. I think that's a kind of different animal.
I think one of the most prevalent changes that we've seen recently is that artists can break through so extremely fast.
You can almost become famous overnight in some ways, but if you've got the right marketing team, the right managers, and then you're being put on planes all over the world.
I went from an office job to touring the world. I had kind of hundreds of gigs a year, all over the place.
I had never traveled before I DJ'd. I didn't even have a passport. So I was like this really small town girl in the big city, being offered all of these gigs, and I didn't really know how to take it at first.
The DJ explosion, it probably took 20 years for the first signs that lifestyle, I mean, forget taking drugs and stuff, but just the lifestyle can have an impact on your mental health.
To share the music that you like and influence people as your job is really highly appealing, given the prevalence of music in everyday life. I mean, some would say it's a dream job.
I'm addicted to the feeling of connecting with a crowd and controlling the vibe.
I want people to understand that the reason why I'm playing this record is because I feel it, I understand it, and I want you to enjoy it too.
There's a love of collecting music, a love of finding rare music. I think sharing music is a huge part of it. There's hundreds of others, sometimes thousands of others, and often, you know, in a dance setting, you're actually entraining your movements to those other people as well. And that results in kind of peak musical experience.
There's some crazy feeling and I guess rush or high that you get from performing and making people happy and seeing this energy. It's an energy connection thing. And that's hard to kind of let go or forget about.
When you are at a gig and you connect and it is like harmonious energy, you know, sharing, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps right now. That for me is why I still do it.
My experiences growing up, talking about the 70s, when DJ was a bit of a joke, really. DJ was someone that came along for a kid's party, or you know, I think the image of a DJ back then in the UK was seen as a very kind of mainstream thing at large.
I think it's changed a lot over the last 20 to 30 years. Now I think what you tend to find is DJs are technicians, they're computer boffins, they're producers, they're programmers, they're sound engineers.
Now DJs don't get booked unless they're making records. And so the two jobs of record producing and DJing have almost fused together, even though some DJs are terrible producers and some producers are terrible DJs, but they're getting booked because they have big records. As a young DJ, when you started 30 years ago, you basically were doing the warm-up for 4, 5, 6 years before you ever got a main room slot.
Now I think you can see someone at the age of 18 thrust into the limelight after one track that's had millions, if not billions of streams.
A 16-year-old can become a worldwide superstar, like Martin Garrix, you know, who can make a record in his bedroom that actually becomes like one of the biggest records in the world, crosses over to become a commercial hit, and he was never even old enough to go in the clubs where it's getting played. That's new.
I think a lot of people, they see a guy DJing at a party, it's cool, and I don't think they really understand the mental and physical toll. Not as much effort, you know, because, I mean, as far as effort's like a totally different, I mean, some DJs put a lot more effort in than others.
The fun bit that you see, I think that's the bit you don't get paid for. It's all the bits in between.
The travelling and the time that you spend on your own is really the side that people don't see. And it does sound a little bit like DJs complaining. And, you know, when maybe some of your friends are working in a frozen food factory, it just seems a bit churlish to mention it. But it is boring. You do spend an awful lot of time on buses, coaches, trains, aeroplanes.
It's a very hard job to get any sympathy for, because everyone thinks they got that image in your head of, you know, private jets and spraying champagne. But it, you know, the touring life of a DJ is really hard.
People think it's a really glamorous lifestyle, and I'm sure for some people it is, but I think it's a small amount of people it's very glamorous for, and nobody's immune to the kind of rigorous schedule that people do.
And most of these DJs, people don't realize, travel alone every weekend, week in, week out, alone. And that type of solitude starts to really shape the human mind in an odd way.
Actually, the thing I think is really detrimental is just the really strange sleeping patterns that you get into.
If you're constantly operating, in a lot of instances, very little sleep on a regular basis, and it becomes enormously punishing.
A lack of sleep can have a profound effect on physical health. It alters our ability to regulate our emotions, regulation of appetite and digestion, can make us more anxious. It can also make us depressed.
I think it can be a really big issue with DJs of the switching off the Saturday night mode, where you're having fun, you're having a party, you're drinking, you're doing whatever, and when it comes to Monday morning, actually having a normal life as opposed to the slightly crazy life that you live on the weekend.
It's an odd profession where either you're in front of like hundreds or thousands of people, and then you're like, ah, and then someone puts you in a room and you're just like alone.
It's the drastic change in going from that buzzing, that high of having a really good gig and being with like loads of friendly people, and then the next day being really hungover and arriving back in London at my flat and it just being completely quiet and dead.
And then you're like, and then that's when it gets like a bit sad and dark. And that's why I think so many DJs have problems with like kind of drugs or even sex addiction and these other things. It's just to cure the loneliness.
The adulation you get from the 2 hours that you're performing in a club, and then those quiet moments after you've finished and you're back in the hotel on your own, or you're perhaps sat in a bus waiting to go to the airport. There's just a really big leap from everyone loving you in this space that you've been in on a Friday and a Saturday night to being just another part of the rabble and the cattle in an airport lounge.
For me, the hardest thing now, at being 50 as a DJ, is the loneliness. Hotels, eating on my own, waking up on my own, all this I found it very heavy. But the joy of sharing the music and having the luck to be able to travel. The plus is so much more than the minus. We can't really complain.
Artists of a certain level of success will usually make an album, start doing press rounds, go on tour for however long, but then after that tour usually will come off the road. You will generally be home for your Christmases and New Year's and holidays, whereas DJs are continuous. There is always something happening. I mean, DJs seem to pride themselves on doing as many gigs in a year as possible. It's always summer somewhere. There's always a huge festival that can't be missed. So it doesn't allow for that period of decompress.
You're a brand, you're being marketed, you're going out, you're on the road, you know, and it's when to say, that's enough touring.
It's tiring in a whole number of different ways. It's tiring from the travel, it's tiring from the lack of sleep, it's tiring from the social interaction of constantly having to be on show.
When I was maybe 10 years ago or 12 years ago, I used to make a lot of gigs and a lot of party. And in between all that, there was a lot of cancellation. I was cancelling a lot of shows and things because I was just hanging out like too much and blah, blah, blah. The way that you become more mature is learning about yourself. I'm good until here, and after that, I'm not good anymore.
At the time, I was young enough to handle no sleep, traveling, playing here, doing this party. One of the things that I learned so much about myself at that time is how hard I could work up to a point where my body started to say, no, you can't.
And it's very hard to say no when you're constantly being asked, oh, you know, we're doing our amazing Wednesday night at Club Division Air, you know, will you come and play that in between, but you've done, you know, Circle Local on Monday and, you know, and then you've got to go play 3 gigs already booked in at the weekend, and you go, oh yeah, I really want to do that.
On that gig, I probably shouldn't do it, but it looks amazing. I don't want to miss out. I want to do it all.
Because there's so much demand for them as well, from the people, the punters. They want to see the DJs, they want to hear the DJs in all these different territories. So they all the requests that keep coming in, it's hard to say no to them.
There's a huge amount of pressure to stay relevant, to stay fresh, to be considered as somebody worth buying into.
I mean, even with Avicii recently quitting touring, you know, he had a crazy schedule, and that's not uncommon. A lot of people have wild schedules.
I think Avicii's situation, once levels dropped, it was almost like someone pushed the lever forward, like in a space rocket, and went, you know, we're going to go warp factor. And then they just kind of mopped up the world, you know, for like 3 or 4 years.
You've got management on your back, you've got agents on your back, you've got labels on your back, and they all want you to tour because you make them more money.
If you ever met up with him, it was like being with the biggest pop star on the planet kind of thing, you know. It just felt like, you know, every minute, every second was accounted for.
I'm starting in 4 minutes.
I think there was an attitude in the camp that it was like, we know this is not going to last forever, so we're going to milk it for as much as we possibly can, as quickly as possible. But you kind of hit a wall with that.
I think we as management have to never forget that people aren't machines.
We've been quite brutal in the past with like cancelling entire weekends because it's just like, look, we can't push on any further. It would be better to pull out of something, even at quite short notice, than to have them come and perform on 50%.
Some people just don't have an off button. They just think that they're indestructible. The more they make, the more they generate. It's just a steamroller effect. More parties, make more money for the management, for the agent, for themselves.
It takes quite a lot of strength to say, you know what, actually, I need to pace myself.
Back when I first started out, it was a really stripped back affair. But now the money is bigger, the responsibilities are bigger.
The DJ carries a massive responsibility on the entertainment in a club. I know it sounds a bit ridiculous because it's not like you're a doctor and you're operating on someone's heart, but you are entertaining 300, 500, 1,000 people in a club. Yeah, there is a certain amount of pressure, right? It's something that I do really take seriously, the fact that people are relying on you to deliver a great time to them.
Certainly now it is a performance. In the scrutiny of social media and instant video everywhere and live streaming, more and more DJs have to be part of a show. And if you are not naturally an extrovert or a performer, you have to switch something on that you may not have.
Yeah, I feel the pressure a lot. I have done for a while. There is a lot of responsibility, and there's obviously pressures of judgment from others, comparison to other people.
I think it's recognised that there needs to be, some adrenaline there, but it's when is that too much, and when does that affect the performance?
DJs get nervous, and before big shows I've seen plenty of acts really shitting themselves.
It's a big business, it's a multi-billion-dollar business. We had no idea it was going to turn into this.
Seeing DJs headline stadiums all over the world with massive production that is not too dissimilar from seeing Coldplay or U2 or Drake or something like that. Obviously it's changed a lot.
With the amount of pressure and the amount of expectation, the guys are there before and after, they're all looking, and he's playing this, he's playing mine, he's playing this. It's like, everything becomes a subject. Music is not the subject anymore, but everything, the technical, the blah, 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 the people that is around, the guy that's in the back, everything becomes a pressure. And all this is like dragging me out from the center, which is music.
This industry brings up so many emotions in an individual to find out where you're at. Can you handle this? Are you the person to be able to actually stand there right now and DJ to these amount of people? Because they're expecting so much from you right now. The expectations of that is of the highest level.
I had to do a lot of work with myself in order to step back and to say, hey man, just do what you know how to do and stop pressuring yourself, and stop squeezing your head as a fucking watermelon,
People expect you always to be on. It's your job, actually, to, people are paying you money to show up and be on and perform and entertain them. But it's like anything else, you're a person, all right? I mean, I've had to DJ a few times after some really traumatic things had just happened. One time, I'd broken up with my ex-fiance, and I was in Russia, and it was like that scene out of The Wedding Singer, where, they're trying to kick him out of being a DJ. I was just sitting there not even mixing or anything. Basically throwing records, fuck you, And it's it's like people expect you to always be on, but performing is a hard thing, considering that you have to deal with your life.
Well, I think the most obvious pitfalls for DJs are easy access to stimulants of various stripes.
You spend most of your working life creating a party, and so therefore, certainly at the early stage of your career, you tend to be part of the party.
Drugs is an experience, is an extrasensorial experience that gives you access to different part of sensibility. Then, I would say, depending on the way you use it, drugs becomes something to hide or something to run away or just an escape or whatever.
I think the amount of artists actually taking drugs while they play has got a lot less now. I think within the techno scene anyway, they're a lot more focused.
At the beginning, you start DJing, you're a kid, and you're playing for people, and at some point it is kind of like, okay, I need to get a little bit loose, let's break it in and have a drink, I think alcohol is more of a problem than anything. Have a drink, I'm gonna have a drink. And then, then 10 years later, it's a bottle per gig. And a lot of DJs, you just get in a loop.
When I arrive at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm like still, like, what's going on? Like waking up, and I have all these people that they're like electrical crazy and blah, blah, blah. And they are screaming in my ears. Sometimes I just feel like I'm gonna punch him in the face because I'm not on that energy. So I straight away, I'm like, give me a shot because I have to level myself to just reach that level of like conversation, yeah.
You get to gig, you have to perform, you're really, really lagging. Drugs, alcohol, always there.
Some shots?
I'll just bring the bottle.
Yeah, cool.
And even if it's not a lot, it's just that cycle, day. Okay, whatever. You know, I need to stay up, cool, boom. After a little while, you're going down on a plane by yourself for 10 hours. Whew. We've lost a lot of people, to drugs. A lot of really talented people who just kind of floated to the wayside.
It's a hard work to find that well-being mentally and physically inside of yourself with what you do without being absorbed into the party thing, the woman thing, the blah blah. It's pretty complicated, yeah. It has a bright side and a very dark side, yeah.
Eric Murillo, he certainly was a DJ that worked, for 10, 15 years, relentlessly. He was the first one to really have a superstar DJ residency in Ibiza.
Pasha, Ibiza, that really took my career to another level. That's when I started with the private plane and having my private plane parked in Ibiza.
You hear those stories of, Puff Daddy turning up and all that. And that was all Eric that brought all that to the scene. And he lost his way.
I was the guy that was leading the charge for house music. I was riding a wave that was so high. I loved what I was doing. I was traveling the world. I decided that I wanted to move to Miami and I wanted to take a break from making music. And at that point, I started dabbling with drugs for the first time in my life. First it was just partying here and there, and then it sort of became more. When the industry in America finally popped, and David Guetta was at the helm of that, and then right behind that came Swedish House Mafia, and I'm in Miami chilling by a pool, I kind of felt like the train had kind of left me behind. All these DJs just got bigger than me, and my ego couldn't take it. It was hard for my ego to say, you're not top dog anymore.
When he saw, Guetta, who was almost an understudy to Eric, and the Swedish House Mafia, to kind of leave him in the dust in terms of their impact on the world, and particularly in America, where he was from, he got very messed up with that. He couldn't handle that.
It was killing me inside, but I didn't know what it was. So the more depressed I got, the more I kept using drugs. And that was the cycle that I got into.
It became pretty dark, and I rode with him for a long time, and I told him I didn't like certain things that he was doing, and he was hurting himself and hurting others around him.
Little by little, things started falling even bigger, and the more things got out of control, what do? You use more, and you use more. Next thing you know, you're on a spiral, out of control, and you're living in your head because you don't talk to nobody.
You're kind of alone in those situations because it's a very private affair, and he chose not to talk about it. He chose to hide away, and it wasn't up to me to reveal or to ask for help.
Helen, when things got really bad and she came to Miami and she saw how much weight I had lost and I missed my gigs, and it was like I let her down big time. It wasn't until therapy that I was able to start understanding and being humbled for the first time. I realized that I was never in control. This is something that I have to continue to be aware of, because you don't get cured from this. All you do is try to live the best life that you can, try to take care of yourself, and try to be real with yourself.
It's hard because it's their private life. They might not want to share. They may not be ready to share what's going on in their head and their space, and that's their personal choice.
With regards to an artist's welfare, ultimately it would be, you could be very blunt and say, you know, artists are grown men and women, they should stand on their own 2 feet and take care of themselves. I'd say, well, that's true for everyone, but at the same time, very few other people have to, you know, live under the 360-degree pressures that a lot of the guys that we work with you know, have to manage.
When you reach a certain level, you're lucky enough that you are surrounded constantly with people that try to take care of you. And I think it would be unfair to blame on someone else than yourself if you're not taking care of yourself. It has to start from you. It has to start from the person that is in the middle, because people are trying many ways to help you constantly. And you would be a prick if you don't realize this, yeah.
The responsibility of all our lives only lies with us. If I'm drinking too much, that's my fault, that's nobody else's. But we can only help as a team, as artists, as tour managers, to make it as easy as possible.
I never thought I would be that person. I never thought I'd become that guy. Now I know. So don't think anybody is immune to that. We're all at risk, and it's really all about dealing with your personal stuff that you have inside.
It crept up on me massively. I didn't realise for a very long time. I was deeply unhappy. I was drinking every day and basically chucking my life down the drain, and I think it got to a point that I knew that if I didn't do something about it, I wouldn't be around much longer.
When I first moved to England from Canada, I arrived in London and I didn't have a support system here. I didn't have anyone that I could just call and sort of vent to, and I found it really, really lonely. Going from gig to after party to airplane to next gig to after party, you kind of get this like need for action constantly, or need for being around people. I would always be looking forward to that sort of getting away from myself, like being outside of myself and being able to put on this show and put on this face of I'm here to play my gig, and like everyone's excited and everyone wants to dance and have a great time. And come Monday, I would be in sort of like a fight or flight mode really, really often. And that was probably like my darkest time.
It's very hard, I think, for people to accept that someone seemingly successful may have psychological issues, and equally that individual may see it as a sign of weakness.
I think I threw myself into this career. I was working in a bank complaint centre as a manager of a call centre team. After my big track came out, I was going away DJing twice at the weekend, often internationally, and then coming back in on Monday and having to give a team talk to 15 people. It was bizarre. I was living the weekend. The effects started to show after a while, and when I came home, I kind of couldn't leave the house, and then it got to the point where I wouldn't want to go away at the weekend.
I kind of went through this quite depressive stage where I had like anxiety all the time, every day.
I was physically getting nervous, kind of being sick and shaking before shows. I kept having this recurring dream where I couldn't decide what songs to play next, and the music would run out and everyone would start laughing. And that freaked me out so deeply that even when I went to gigs, for a second, if I didn't know what to play, that would start happening in my head again. So and then I'd start shaking again. So it was a very surreal situation. I didn't understand it. I still don't. I'm trying to get there with the help of with people. I felt guilty because there's a lot of people that would love to be in the situation that I am. I didn't think that I deserved anything that was coming to me.
There's something in psychology and therapy environments which is called imposter syndrome, which is where an individual may feel almost like a fraudster, that actually they're not as able or as talented or as intelligent as the media are actually portraying them.
You don't deserve to be here, you're a fraud, you're a fake. Getting paid to go around the world and you're just basically cheating everybody, and this kind of perpetuated for a long time. I was searching on Twitter, I was actively looking for negative reviews, negative tweets, just so I'd get some tangible reason why I should be feeling this way. And I sat up after a gig in the hotel looking for somebody, waiting for someone to tweet saying I was rubbish. I've seen various kind of therapists trying to find the right one. I've started doing meditation, Vedic meditation, which has really made a difference.
The way I would feel in the evenings was that I had so much energy that I just couldn't wind down and sleep. So I started practicing yoga as much as I could. The meditation helped immensely and to just calm my thoughts and learn to control them.
Been a bit more healthy, cut down on drinking, obviously. I'm not saying it's just gone. It's making the dips a bit less dippy.
The idea of people knowing there's help there or there's ways to conquer this, I think is the thing that we need to get out there.
There's not enough awareness. I'm not saying everybody should be an expert, but just having a little bit of an understanding, because it's very easy to pigeonhole.
I think psychological issues have a stigma in society, not just in electronic music, and I think especially psychological issues are a particular problem with males.
It's mostly a male-dominated industry. For men to ask for help is not historically known not to be the first thing that we do. The idea of therapy it can be taboo.
It felt good to just have time away, because I know deep down I want to do this as a career. I love music, but I just need to find a structure in which it works for me.
Honestly, I don't think our industry has been doing enough. I think we have relied on individual organisations or the DJs themselves to put the hand up and say there's an issue and to solve it. And I think now is the time to collectively recognise that there is a problem and collectively do something about it.
The biggest challenge a DJ faces now is to stay employed. It's amazingly hard. I'm not saying it's easy to become a DJ who earns money, but I think it's easier to get some recognition at the start of your career than it is to maintain that career over a long period of time.
There's so many pitfalls in DJing, and to stay in the game is quite hard. And so many times people are like, oh, whatever happened to that guy? And the thing that always comes up is life happened to him.
Some people get into that tumble dryer, go around a few times and get spun out, and we never hear of them again. Other ones manage to stay in there and actually start to almost like calm things down and like to manage the madness.
Someone like Martin Garrix is showing the way. He's very talented, he's very young, he has his family behind him.
He had a great maturity about him when I saw him play, and I couldn't explain, when I saw him step out on stage for the first time, it looked like he'd been doing it for 10 years.
He's just one individual that was a DJ when he was more or less born to where he is now. He wasn't like he made a record last week and all of a sudden he's playing at main stage Tomorrowland.
He got all this amazing footage from his dad of him doing mobile DJing when he was like 8 or 9. So he actually had been doing it for almost 10 years. From my perspective, I guess the thing is, you're just managing kind of growing older gracefully. The touring life of a DJ at different phases of your life is incredibly tough.
I saw Danny Tenaglia in Miami a couple of years ago, and he played an 8-hour set and he was sat down for the whole thing on a throne. So you can definitely, it's very sustainable in that way. You don't have to stand up. So
once you get a family, or you've got any aspirations of getting a family, you start having kids and stuff like that, then it becomes 50 times harder. That's probably the biggest cost of DJing.
It's a really crazy life. I mean, it's something I'm looking to do for maybe another 10 years and then kind of get out, because I think there is like an expiration date on your own sanity and trying to keep human with being a DJ.
Some of the people on the circuit have been doing it for years. I almost like them, and they're in their 40s, but they're kind of like child men, you know, because they chose not to have families. And families either like you put the brakes on you or you have to deal with it in a different way, or they fall apart. And then you start having different families, different wives, different boyfriends, or different husbands.
I look at my peers, so my older peers, and yeah, they've had incredible lives, you know, but like if you look at them having families or them living actually the human experience, there's very few who've been able to make that transfer.
At some point, I would like to start a family. You know, I've sacrificed a lot of things to be where I am today, family being one of them.
It's always something in the back of my mind because obviously everyone wants to have a social life, they want to have a love life. They maybe want to have a family one day, and that's something that I consider. If I do want to have children one day, it's going to be a choice that I'm going to have to make to take some weekends off because I'm going to want to spend time with them.
I was 22 when my daughter came to this world. To be honest, at the very beginning I was insecure about myself, not insecure about my daughter, but I was insecure about myself, being so young and not being ready to be a dad, and all these questions that comes, and I was not sure I could raise a kid in all this environment. And actually my daughter was the one who helped me out to find the way through this. I got lost many times there in between, and family was always the thing that brought me back to my center, to who I am, and not losing my head in the bubbles and the glitter and everything.
I think it's very important as a DJ to engage with ordinary life and have ordinary things happening, because it's the thing that keeps your feet on the floor.
When I was 30, it was okay for me to be away every weekends. But, you know, I went to 40 and then I had my son. I'd like to see my son grow. I don't want to miss out on the best years. I have my working life and then I have my private life. I think you have to, whatever work you do, to separate the two.
Top-end DJs are like high-end CEOs. There's a certain kind of mindset that of someone who is a high-performing individual. Guys like Sven or Carl or Dubfire and Rich, these guys are fucking machines. Even just to get to this level of DJing, everyone just tells you, no, it's not possible, it's not possible, it's not possible. And you're like, no, yeah, this is how it's gonna happen. Your life as a musician impacts kids every day. That's the biggest thing.
Ultimately, if you can do a job you love and actually make a living out of it, then you consider yourself every morning to be very, very lucky.
It's very hard to maintain a life, really hard. I think I'm probably still working on how to figure that out, but you have to understand the sacrifices to be made if you really want to be good at this.